Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to the second day for those who have just joined us, and to the keynote to be delivered by the Governor of the State Bank of Pakistan, Mr. Jameel Ahmad Saab. I wish he had spent more time here in the first session, because when we talk about women economists, there's a complete absence of women economists in public spaces. And I think as somebody who runs the IBA, it's something that we are conscious of. And my dean who was sitting here, Asma Haider, I think Dr. Lubna Naz is not here. We have two women economists. Lubna Naz is sitting there. We have two women full professors who are economists. Unfortunately, we need not enough. We don't have enough. We need many more. I'm on the board of governors of the State Bank. And before Jameel Ahmad Saab joined us as governor of the State Bank, there were 8, and there are still 8 men on the board of governors of the State Bank, and we regularly request all 8 men there, all of them, every single one of them, regularly request the governor of the State Bank to please ask the Minister of Finance, the Ministry of Finance, to send us women economists or women leaders on the board of governors of the State Bank. And he's extremely enthusiastic about it. And he said that we've sent summaries to the Ministry of Finance when it was Miftah Ismail, when it was Ishaq Dar, and now we have a third Minister of Finance who's been a governor of the State Bank of Pakistan, Dr. Shamshad Akhtar. But unfortunately still, we have no women on the board of governors of the State Bank. And I think that's very unfortunate. We are losing out, as Alia said, and as Asma said, and as Sundar said. The presence of women in every single forum, especially something as important, every single one. So I'm not going to say especially, but I'll still say especially, like the board of governors of the State Bank, or the Monetary Policy Committee of the State Bank, or any institution. I'm glad we have one dean at least. We need 3 women deans, but we have one dean who's a woman. So that's an introduction. And I want to say that Jameel Ahmad Saab, the governor of the State Bank, is very supportive. He writes to the ministry every time we discuss this, but it's at the ministry's end where this has not been done. So I'm going to welcome Jameel Ahmad Saab. He's the governor of the State Bank. He's had many decades of experience in the State Bank. And I think had we asked him to come 5 months ago to the IBA or at a public forum, I think he would have said something very different. Today, just yesterday, the IMF signed an agreement. I don't know if that's something to celebrate or not. I question that, but nevertheless, the IMF signed an agreement with the government of Pakistan, and the Governor Saab was involved in the discussions. So our format is going to be that Governor Jameel Ahmad Saab is going to come and speak for about 15 or 20 minutes. Then we'll have about 10 minutes of discussion because he has to rush to a meeting, and I have to go, and I have something else to move on as well. So that's the form. So Jameel Ahmad Saab, please, welcome to the IBA.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dr. Akbar Zaidi Saab, Executive Director, IBA, and our board member. Mr. Naji bin Hussain, Country Director of World Bank. Distinguished panelists, faculty members, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon, very good morning. It gives me immense pleasure to attend this 3rd annual international conference organized by the School of Economics and Social Sciences at IBA Karachi. I am delighted to share my views with the distinguished audience. The theme of this conference is very appropriate, both in the context of Pakistan's economic challenges as well as the changing global environment. We are living in an era of increasingly uncertain global environment. Over the past few years, we have witnessed a series of rare global events in a short span of time, with wide-ranging implications for our economy. These events include a healthcare pandemic that happens once in a lifetime, adverse geopolitical events, and frequent climate change-driven natural disasters that added new dimensions and challenges for economic policymakers. By and large, countries have responded to these events and the evolving developments with standard tools and policy responses, and the performance is mixed. It is therefore worth asking ourselves as policymakers, academics, and students about what could we have done differently. One thing is clear though, countries with strong fundamentals and adequate buffers have outperformed those countries that lack these characteristics. But before discussing what sets apart countries' responses and performances, it is important to highlight the truly global nature of the crisis we are facing. Inflation has risen across emerging and advanced economies after a prolonged period of low and stable inflation. Global inflation has risen to an estimated 8.7% in 2022, the highest level in about a quarter century. In many advanced economies, inflation in recent years was multiple times than their longer-term average. For instance, annual inflation in the US and UK in 2022 was over 4 times their average during the pre-COVID decade. For Germany, Italy, and Spain, inflation in 2022 was over 6 times their pre-COVID average. This high inflation is the result of multiple shocks to the global economy, including the commodity price supercycle, higher freight costs, Russia-Ukraine war in early 2022, and adverse weather events. Such elevated inflation levels put the credibility of central banks in question and called for using all available tools to bring the inflation down. Central banks globally responded by raising interest rates to combat inflation from 2021 onwards. Emerging markets generally raised rates earlier on than advanced economies. However, the monetary tightening in advanced economies had major implications for capital flows to emerging markets and contributed to a flight to safety. This put many emerging market currencies under pressure. This contributed further to higher inflation by increasing the cost of imported products, especially energy and food items. As you know, the past 2 years have been especially challenging for Pakistan. Post-pandemic supply-side constraints, adverse terms of trade shocks, conflict in Europe, and catastrophic floods last year resulted in a sharp slowdown in economic growth, a surge in inflation, and a weakening in fiscal and external buffers. Inflation in Pakistan reached to an all-time high of 38% in last May. Similarly, Pakistan's external account came under considerable stress during fiscal year 2022 when the current account deficit crossed $17 billion for the fiscal year. At the same time, the tight global financial conditions and elevated risk premiums made it challenging for Pakistan to access to global financial markets. Meanwhile, delays in the IMF program reviews led to drying up of external financing flows. Despite these difficult conditions, the country made all the debt repayments on time as they came due. As a result, the SBP's foreign exchange reserves fell significantly and reached a low of around $3 billion in January 2023. These challenges of fast rising inflation and weak external account position warranted a strong and forceful policy response by the central bank. Let me highlight that SBP was among the first few central banks that began to tighten monetary policy in response to the emerging inflationary concerns. The SBP raised the policy rate as early as in September 2021 at a time when major central banks were debating whether the ongoing inflation was transitory in nature. Since then, the SBP has raised the policy rate by 1,500 basis points cumulatively to 22% in last June. Moreover, the government managed to achieve some fiscal consolidation in fiscal year 2023. The fiscal consolidation is continuing this year as well, with the primary balance surplus almost doubling in Q1 2024 over the same period last year. Ladies and gentlemen, these tough but necessary policy decisions have begun to yield the desired results. Inflation peaked at 38% in May 2023, and it is trending down from that high level, reaching 26.9% in last month. Our forecasts indicate that inflation will decline more sharply in the second half of fiscal year 2024 and come down to the 5 to 2% range by end of fiscal year 2025, which is our medium-term target for inflation in Pakistan. There are a number of factors that will bring down inflation. First, the real interest rates are positive on forward-looking basis, which will help to keep demand-side pressures in check. Second, our assessment indicates that the output gap to be negative, which would further contain inflationary pressures. Third, domestic supplies have improved after post-COVID recovery in agriculture and better availability of imported goods. Fourth, global commodity prices are trending down, which has favorable implications for domestic prices. Fifth, fiscal policy is complementing monetary policy efforts to bring down inflation to the medium-term target. Similarly, monetary growth has slowed down with positive implications for inflation. Finally, inflation expectations of both consumers and businesses are also declining from their peak, and wage inflation is also slowing down. In the external account also, the demand compression measures and market-determined exchange rate have helped to restrain import demand. As a result, the current account deficit narrowed by over 87% to $2.2 billion in fiscal year 2023, and is down by 58% during first quarter of fiscal year 2024 to $947 million. And we are expecting for the October month also that inflation will be, that current account will be well below $100 million. So we are hoping that for the first 4 months, the inflation, the current account will stay below $1.1 billion. So if this trend continues this year also, the current account deficit will be well contained. On the composition of current account, we see that the import volumes contracted while export volumes of high value added textiles further improved in recent months. Moreover, workers' remittances monthly inflows remained above $2 billion and are expected to improve going forward. The improvement in the current account has led the SBP's FX reserves to rise to around $7.5 billion. At the same time, the SBP's forward liabilities have reduced to $3.5 billion. By the way, this peaked to $5.7 billion few months back. So from $5.7 billion, we have been able to bring them down to around $3.5 billion by the end of September 2023, and subsequently it has further been reduced. As you may also know that Pakistan has reached the staff level agreement with the IMF on the first review of the ongoing SBA program, and the executive board of the fund is expected to give approval for the review soon. This is expected to unlock significant official external inflows from the IMF and other multilateral and bilateral sources. We foresee FX reserves to improve further in the coming months. At the same time, the high-frequency economic activity indicators are showing a modest recovery amidst better agriculture output and some uptick in industrial activity. The latest production estimates of major kharif crops show encouraging picture, with positive spillover effects on industry and services sectors. Input conditions were favorable as indicated by higher fertilizer uptake, better availability of water, and rising tractor sales. Also, the large-scale manufacturing output indicated a gradual recovery in the first 2 months of this fiscal year. Ladies and gentlemen, notwithstanding these improvements, there is also a significant short-term economic cost associated with such stabilization policies in the form of slowdown in economic activity. It is therefore imperative for the policymakers to ensure that such severe macroeconomic policy adjustments are not needed every few years. This would only be possible by pursuing a set of structural reforms to achieve price and external sector stability and put the economy on the track of sustainable growth. We all know that Pakistan's economy has experienced repeated boom and bust cycles despite undergoing multiple stabilization programs. A short period of high economic growth, often led by favorable global developments like foreign inflows or low global oil prices, leads to widening twin deficits. This is followed by dwindling of foreign exchange reserves and spike in inflation. The country has to approach IMF and implement macroeconomic stabilization measures, including high interest rates and fiscal consolidation. Why is this so? The short answer is that Pakistan severely lags behind other countries in generating the resources, especially non-debt creating foreign exchange inflows, which are needed to grow in a competitive global environment. Stagnant exports means we are always deficient in foreign exchange, which increases our reliance on external loans for needed imports. Our exports to GDP ratio at 9.4% on average during 2028 to 2022 is below that of much smaller countries. Lack of exports have implications for global interconnectedness and domestic industrial activity and sophistication. Our tax collection at less than 10% of GDP over the past years is substantially below regional peers and other emerging markets, which increases the need for borrowing funds to keep the government running. This resource scarcity means we are unable to undertake the needed investments in human development, especially on healthcare and education, to produce a 21st century workforce. This is reflected in the declining trend in labor productivity in Pakistan, which is a serious cause of concern for all of us. Perhaps most importantly, addressing these shortcomings is necessary to rebuild our fiscal and foreign exchange buffers. Given the frequency of adverse global shocks, including wide swings in commodity prices and restrained access to global financial markets, it is important for countries to have sufficient fiscal and FX buffers. While all economies recently experienced high inflation levels, some of them managed to bring inflation down to their targets more quickly than others. The successful ones tend to have high levels of fiscal and FX buffers that allowed them to lessen the overall impact of inflation on businesses and the general public. These buffers also allowed them to better protect the most vulnerable population segments from the impact of high inflation. As such, there is a dire need to undertake structural reforms across almost all spheres of Pakistan's economy in order for the country to harness its untapped growth potential. There is a need for all stakeholders, including the government, businesses, and the general public, to come together and reach a consensus on a common set of objectives and the way to achieve them. If we as a society accept that these structural reforms are the need of the hour to address the macroeconomic imbalances on permanent basis and to reap the demographic dividends of a large proportion of bright youth, I am confident that there is no reason why we cannot grow faster and catch up with our more successful emerging market peers. While doing so, we must remain clear in our objectives and flexible enough to tweak policies where needed. As the famous economist John Maynard Keynes once said, the difficulty lies not in new ideas, but in escaping from the old ones. To this end, State Bank is aiming to play an increasingly active role and contribute to a more informed debate on the major challenges facing our economy and the way forward to address them. We are launching our new strategic plan for the next 5 years, in which we are introducing several initiatives to help us achieve our core objectives of price and financial stability and to support economic growth. They include impactful research on macroeconomic issues to enhance effectiveness of monetary policy, implementation of global best practices in the financial services industry, and renewed efforts to utilize digitization to drive financial inclusion. You will see the SBP increasingly taking part in events like this one which is organized by IBA Karachi, which brings together professionals, academics, and the younger generation on one platform to share ideas to move our country forward. I would once again like to thank IBA Karachi for inviting me to address at this year's conference. I am also thankful to the audience for your time and look forward to an informative discussion from my fellow panelists and participants. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Governor Jameel Ahmad Saab. So I'm not going to ask any questions, unlike, because we have little time. So the floor is open. Please keep your questions precise, to the point. We'll probably just take 2 rounds of questions because we have a hard constraint at 11 o'clock. So what I will do is I'll take about 3 questions, preferably from students. This is a very good opportunity. If you ever think about monetary policy, this is the person, well, maybe not him, but this is the institution which is supposed to determine monetary policy, the exchange rate and things like that. So this is a very good opportunity to speak to somebody in the position of influence and who looks after the economy. So 3 questions and then we'll do another round, then we'll see how we are for time. Aapne haath uthaya tha ji. If you have the mic. Yeah. Please introduce yourself. Short questions so that we can get many people.
Thank you, sir. This is Muhammad Ishan. I'm from PIDE. You tell that State Bank of Pakistan has dual role of price and financial stability, right? The financial stability is the interest, the policy rate is, the lending rate is, I think, above 20%. So where is the financial stability for the domestic commerce? I don't think the domestic commerce can survive with that high lending rate. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, please. You have the mic. Yeah.
Well, good morning, first of all. My name is Leif Dierks. I'm from the Lübeck University, teaching, as a matter of fact, monetary policy. I'll have a very brief question. To what extent can Pakistan deal with an interest rate north of 20% before you will have a too strongly dampening impact on economic growth?
Yeah. Similar. Similar question. Yeah, there. This gentleman here. Please, students, think of your questions after this.
My name is Salim Khan and I'm from PIDE. My question is that commercial bank credit goes to the government and government is non-interest sensitive sector. So if we increase interest rate, so it will not affect the demand side of the economy. And it further squeeze the financial condition for private sector. So there is a study about that inflation gain and the interest cost we are increasing, just like advanced country are increasing.
Thank you. Very good, sharp, precise question. Ji Jameel Ahmad Saab.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think all these are very good questions. I will start with the first two, which are related questions on the financial stability and the impact of interest rate on financial stability. So we have been very carefully assessing the impact of high interest rates. Obviously, when the interest rates are raised, it has some benefits, and there are some adverse effects of interest rates also. So in the context of financial stability, we have been assessing the financial soundness and asset quality of individual banks as well as the banking system overall. And we also have a very elaborate stress testing framework also in State Bank of Pakistan. And as you some of know, may be aware of also, we have a full financial stability department which have good resources, I will say, and they have good understanding of the stress testing frameworks and stress testing the financial institutions. So we quarterly do this stress testing and assess the impact of high interest rates on individual banks as well as the overall banking system. And along with many other scenarios which we built for assessing the soundness of the banking system and any vulnerabilities which are there in the banking system as a result of changing macroeconomic environment. So our assessment is that right now the banking system of the Pakistan is quite stable. Individual institutions are so barring 2-3 small sized banks. All of them are working very well, and their capital adequacy levels are well above the minimum requirements set by the State Bank of Pakistan. And State Bank's capital adequacy requirements are based on international standards framed by the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision. And in fact, our requirements are somewhat higher than the Basel Committee. We have set 11.5% minimum capital adequacy requirements for individual banks. And as I said, with the exception of a couple of them, all others are meeting those requirements. And overall banking system capital adequacy level is well above 17%. And this is measured on the Basel framework. So I don't see any issue at this stage as far as the financial stability is concerned. But obviously the high interest rates have impact on businesses, and you have to then see, given the high level of inflation which we have and which peaked in last May to 38%. So if we continue with this high level of inflation, obviously it has serious implications for our economy. So that's the reason we have to take this difficult route to raise the interest rates and address the high inflation, along with other policy and administrative measures which are being taken both by the central bank and by the government of Pakistan. So you have seen recently that these policy measures as well as the tight monetary stance have started yielding results, and the inflation has started coming down. And as we have said in our last monetary policy statement, that from the second half of this financial year, the impact will be much more visible, and the inflation will start coming down. And this is not just our assessment. The recent assessment by the IMF also, and this is reflected in the press release which they have given on conclusion of the IMF program, that inflation in Pakistan will start coming down from second half of this fiscal year. So this is an independent assessment which endorses what we have been saying for the last few months in our monetary policy statements. This last one, the bank credit, obviously government of Pakistan is one of the major borrowers, in fact the key borrower of credit from the banking system. So this is an issue which has also been under discussion, and you have seen that recently the government of Pakistan has also started the fiscal consolidation, and as a result of that the current account deficit has sharply come down. For the first quarter it was, last year also it came down from over 3% to less than 1%. It was 0.8% fiscal deficit last fiscal year, 2023. And in the first quarter of this year, it has further came down. And we are hoping that if this trend of fiscal consolidation continue, the government borrowing will also reduce, and as a result, it will provide scope for further expansion of private sector credit also. And with the revival of the economy, and as we have seen recently also that there are indicators of economic activity improving. So with that, the private sector credit will also start picking up, and as a result of that, the banking sector will have more flow of credit to private sector as well.
Thank you very much. We can take 3 more questions. Gentleman over there, Professor Saab. One over there, another professor of economics. Yeah.
My name is Dr. Amir Hamza, and I'm a full-time faculty at IBA Karachi. Earlier, Dr. Asma insisted that we should rethink economics. So I'm rethinking economics and development as well. So for me, economic development, so it's not mere like the rise of statistics or the rise of data or the rise of any kind of a graph. So it's a human development as well. When I talk about the human development, so actually I mean, let me give you an example. So for me, it matters that my kids should have money in pocket, but what matters more to me, that they should have substance in mind too, that they should have some vision in mind too. And my kids should stand on their feet, but they should stand initially on their minds too. So my question from you is, do you believe in sociology of economics? So if you believe, what at your level, at your organization, you do to pursue it? Thank you.
Faiz.
Thank you. Currently, State Bank of Pakistan is using tight monetary policy to control aggregate demand side inflation. However, there are some studies, and the Monetary Policy Committee of State Bank also recognized that the supply side inflation contributes around 75 to 80% in the inflation. I was wondering that such a tight monetary policy of around 22% interest rate is not very costly to suppress a very small share of demand side inflation.
आपने आगे हाथ उठाया. Anybody else? Because then I want to close. आप पूछ चुके? Any woman? We want gender parity. We just had so much discussion on that. Okay, there's one. So आप पूछते फिर उसके बाद आप. Okay. You want to ask a question? The woman in white, wearing white. नहीं? Yeah. You want to know?
Okay. I'm Najam Memon. I'm just asking the question: what are the policies of State Bank of Pakistan to incentivize the green transition in Pakistan? We see in the world, throughout the world, there are a lot of policies and a lot of financial incentives from the financing institutions for the customers, for the consumers. But what are the policies of State Bank of Pakistan for the customers of Pakistan, not the industrialists?
Last question, Junaid.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Junaid Memon. I'm faculty at IBA. I was just wondering, I'm not an economist, but I was just wondering that you may be happy that government is not borrowing from State Bank anyway, and I mean it is now on the doors of private banking. But if I see, as a non-economist, I see that earlier government was borrowing from itself and the interest was going in government's own pocket. So don't you think that this change has actually increased government's budget deficit? Thank you.
So I think on the question which was about the tight monetary policy and its impact on demand, and inflation is more demand driven and it's more supply side shocks. So I think this debate is going on for quite some time, and we have seen that people arguing that if the policy rate is the right tool to control inflation. What we have seen, as you know, we also have a research department and full economic policy and monetary policy teams which have been continuously looking into these issues, and our assessment is that, and this is also based also on experience of other countries, that the tight monetary policy obviously do have impact on inflation. But its impact is with some time lag. It's not that you raise the policy rate and it starts immediately yielding the results. It always takes some time, and various studies have shown that it takes around 6 to 8 quarters before the full impact of tight policy will start visible impact on inflation. So in our case also, as I briefly mentioned, that we started the tightening of policy rate in September 2021. Initially it was at a slower pace, and then we have much faster tightening, and as a result of that, the policy rate was increased to 22% in June 2023. And since it has, when we increased it in June, it was almost one and a half years, 6 quarters that we have started the tightening process. So it started yielding the results, and you have seen that from May 2023, the inflation has peaked, and after that, from June, it started coming down. And as I said, we are quite confident that from early next year, calendar next year, and the second quarter of this fiscal year, from starting first quarter of 2024, it will start coming down sharply. So it do have impact, although there are certain factors from the supply side also, and as you know, we have gone through the floods and its impact on our crops, and as a result, reduced supply of food items. So it has contributed in the inflationary pressures, and since these supply side issues are also being addressed through the policy measures being taken by both the government as well as the central bank. So it's both on supply as well as demand side improvement that has started now yielding the results, and it will be, the inflation will be on downward trajectory. And we have a medium-term target of 5 to 7%, which we are aiming to achieve by the end of fiscal year 2025 for inflation. And we think that we are on track, and hopefully we will be able to reduce the inflation to 5 to 7% medium target by the end of fiscal 2025. The other question on the government, again, it was related government borrowing. I think I have already responded this question, that government borrowing will start will start on declining trend with the improved fiscal position of the government, as well as the declining inflation, and as a result of its impact on the interest rates going forward. So it will have positive impact on the government borrowing requirements, and as a result of that, there will be more room for the private sector also. So government is also quite aware of this situation, and that's the reason they have also started fiscal consolidation for bringing the borrowing requirements down.
Thank you very much. Jameel साहब गवर्नमेंट का जिक्र कर रहे हैं, लेकिन नई गवर्नमेंट आएगी, देखें वो क्या करती है. How fiscally constrained it wants to be, and with the IMF program coming to an end. So anyway, thank you Jameel साहब for coming, and thank you ladies and gentlemen for your questions and comments and all. And please a hand of applause for